You know, when you hear P-51 Mustang, your mind probably jumps straight to World War II, right? An iconic fighter, dominating the skies over Europe and the Pacific. But what if I told you that for one of the world's most famous aircraft, the story didn't end in 1945? Not even close. In fact, a whole new, fascinating chapter was just getting started, and that's the story we're digging into. That's right. For hundreds of these incredible machines, the end of global conflict wasn't retirement. It was just a redeployment. This is the remarkable story of the P-51's second life as the guardian of Canada's skies at the very dawn of the Cold War. Okay, so before we get to that second life, it's worth taking just a moment to remember why the Mustang was such a legend in the first place. During the Second World War, this plane wasn't just good at one thing. It was a master of pretty much everything. I mean, on every single front, the P-51 proved it could do it all. It was the long-range escort fighter, flying shotgun for bombers deep into enemy territory. It was a vicious ground attack aircraft, a fighter bomber, a reconnaissance plane, and even an interceptor, used to hunt down those terrifying V-1 flying bombs over England. This incredible versatility is what made it one of the most effective and absolutely crucial aircraft of the entire war. But as the world moved from a hot war to a cold one, the Mustang found a brand new purpose. While thousands and thousands of other warplanes were being sent to the scrapyard, the Royal Canadian Air Force, the RCAF, they saw a golden opportunity. They made the call to purchase 130 battle-proven P-51D Mustangs from the United States. This single move would create the new backbone of Canada's fighter force in what was becoming an increasingly tense and dangerous post-war world. Now, in Canadian service, they weren't really called P-51s. They were officially designated the Mustang Mark IV. They were just adopting the same naming system that the British Royal Air Force had used during the war. The planes arrived in waves. The first batch showed up in the summer of 1947, but here's what's really telling on this slide. Look at the timing of the next deliveries. The bulk of the fleet arrives between late 1950 and early 1951. Now, what's happening in the world at that exact moment? The Korean War is escalating, and Cold War tensions are just about at their peak. This was no simple surplus buy, it was a strategic buildup. So what did Canada do with this brand new fleet of thoroughbred fighters? Well, they were put right to work defending Canadian airspace and training a whole new generation of pilots for a new kind of threat. Their main job was to equip the RCAF's auxiliary squadrons. These were reserve units, basically. They were manned by part-time pilots and crew, the weekend warriors of their day, who stood guard in cities from Vancouver to Winnipeg to Hamilton. And you can see here that auxiliary air defense role was their primary mission, a full 60% of their duty. But they also served with 2 regular, full-time squadrons and were absolutely indispensable for training, for experimental flying, and in armament schools, making sure the RCAF stayed a capable, modern force. By the late 1950s, the jet age was well and truly here, and the Mustang's time as a frontline fighter was coming to a close. But for many of these very specific Canadian aircraft, another chapter was just beginning, one that would see them become famous all over again in a completely different world. Just look at RCAF serial number 9276. It flew with number 442 Squadron out of Vancouver. After it was damaged in a landing, it was sold as surplus, but it was painstakingly rebuilt over many, many years and eventually re-emerged as the famous air racer Dazzling Donna, a plane that thrilled crowds for years. Or how about this one? RCAF 9246. After serving with number 416 Squadron, it was damaged and turned into a ground instructional airframe. Then, in 1968, the Canadian government gifted it to the Imperial War Museum in the UK. Today, it's preserved at Duxford, a permanent tribute to its service. And right here in Canada, we have RCAF 9298. After serving across the country, it was one of the very first aircraft to be set aside for preservation. It's been part of the National Collection since 1961 and is now a prized exhibit at the Canadian Aviation and Space Museum in Ottawa. So the crucial point here is that this wasn't just an isolated story of a few lucky survivors. Now, 39 aircraft were lost in service accidents over the years, but the vast majority, around 90 planes, survived their military careers. They were sold off, and that ensured the legacy of Canada's Mustangs would continue for decades in the hands of civilian owners, racers, and museums. But the story doesn't quite end there. Deep within the history of the RCAF's Mustang fleet, there's a persistent, fascinating mystery, one that pits official records against a very compelling first-hand account. And the question is simple. Did the Royal Canadian Air Force ever operate a two-seat, dual-control version of the Mustang for training? You see, the standard P-51 was a single-seater, but a few were converted into these trainers. Well, the official answer, from the leading experts who have spent decades studying the records, is an emphatic no. As historian Jerry Vernon says, he is 100% certain there were no dual-control RCAF Mustangs. Full stop. There's just no official record of one ever being owned, modified, or even borrowed. And yet, we have this, a direct, first-hand account from C.F.A. Collins, a British pilot training in Canada in 1953. He doesn't just claim he saw two dual-control Mustangs arrive at his base. He says he was part of an experiment where he personally flew hours of dual instruction in one of them. And this just lays the mystery bare. You have a detailed claim of nearly 8 hours of dual flight time. The pilot says the planes were marked as United States Air Force property, just there on a temporary loan. And here is the real clincher. Collins's later Canadian pilot's license officially certified his P-51D dual time, which means it had to have been verified by the authorities. Yet, despite all this, there is absolutely no official military record of this loan or this experiment ever happening, not a whisper. So, what is the truth? Was it just a simple case of a memory getting fuzzy over the decades? Or was this a brief, undocumented training experiment, a forgotten piece of Cold War cooperation that has since been lost to the history books, leaving behind only one pilot's memory and a single, tantalizing line in a logbook? That is a question we may never be able to answer.